Hello everyone, I have returned. Although I should probably stop saying that, given how many times I do this. So, anyways, I figured out that trying to do a weekly schedule isn't really going to work for me. So instead, I'm going to go into trying to do like an hour or two every day working on a video, and then whenever I have one, I'm just going to publish it. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, for today's video, I'm going to try and do something that I saw on a different channel, the Templin Institute specifically. And I'm going to try and build my own fleet, though, as always, I'm going to give myself some proper restrictions and guidelines. So, to get a little more specific, this is a fleet that's going to replace the standard Imperial response that occurs roughly around the Battle of Yavin. And by standard Imperial response, I mean if you were to call for assistance as a local planet, you would be assigned a certain number of vessels or whatnot, and that would be your response. I'm going to be replacing that with my own fleet. What this does is it allows me to budget out the original fleet and then apply that budget to my new fleet. So that way I know roughly the amount of cost that's going to take for both fleets and keep it within the same realm of reason. So, what is the standard Imperial response? It's one Star Destroyer. It is a single Star Destroyer. If you find rebels and the Empire wants to do something about it, they throw a Star Destroyer at it. It's very standard Imperial practice, so we're just using that. Now, this Star Destroyer comes equipped with 48 squadrons of TIE fighters and 1 squadron of TIE bombers. This leads to a total cost of 154,680,000 credits. You'll see why I added the fighters into the budget here later. Now, what kind of opponents is this response going to be sent against? Well, obviously rebels and sometimes pirates, but we're going to use rebels as our example just because it helps me make things easier on my head. Now, I have 4 types of rebel forces that I may have to engage with. I've split them into 2 groups, an assault force and 3 harassment forces. So the very first force we're going to deal with is the assault force, and it's going to begin and be based around one MC-40A cruiser. This is a light rebel cruiser, does kind of light duty, and it carries with it 1 squadron of X-Wings, though that may change. But for planning purposes, we'll use X-Wings. Secondly, this force will be supported by 2 CR-90 Corellian corvettes, also known as the Rebel Blockade Runner. They're great for getting past blockades, as well as dropping supplies and taking out enemy fighters. In addition, there are 2 unattached squadrons of X-Wings that are just hanging out, that fly with the fleet, as well as 2 squadrons of Y-Wings. Now, my biggest assumption with this set of rebel forces is that I will have some type of heads-up. I may not know exactly where they're going to strike, I may not know exactly when they're going to strike, but I will hear that the rebels are going to perform some type of larger assault, so that allows me the ability to consolidate my forces. At least somewhat. So the big issue I'm going to have to deal with this particular force is the number of fighters that they have, as well as their starfighter defenses. If I'm unable to take out the X-Wings and Y-Wings before, well, they take out all of my fighters in starfighter defense, they're basically going to run rampant through my fleet and destroy every one of my vessels. So I'm going to need to keep that in mind. While the MC-40 is going to be not particularly easy to destroy, it also isn't particularly powerful, so it should fall to most capital defenses. Next up, we're going to go into the rebel harassment forces, and these forces I've decided that I won't have heads up. I will know that they're operating somewhat in the area, but whether they show up or not, I'm not really going to know, and I'm not going to know when or where. They're just kind of going to appear, and I'm going to have to deal with them. So, the first group that we have is a CR-90 and 1 squadron of A-Wings. Obviously, this group is going to be extremely capable of just taking out fighters. If I throw fighters at this fleet, they're going to tear right through them. Apologies for calling everything a fleet. I understand it's more of a small squadron, but yeah. My second harassment force to deal with is 2 squadrons of X-Wings. Now, as I've stated before, the X-Wing is arguably the best all-around fighter in Star Wars, so they're not going to be easy to deal with, and having 2 squadrons of X-Wings drop out of hyperspace onto wherever they want is a bit of a problem for me. But the good news for me, it's a uniform force, so a solution for 1 X-Wing will work for all 12, or all 24. And finally, we have the third harassment force of one light freighter, a half squadron of A-Wings, and a half squadron of Y-Wings. To be perfectly frank, this is the force I expect to get the best jump on me, given that they have a freighter and only two half squadrons. It's not unreasonable to see Y-Wings kind of flying around on their own. Sure, they were a military fighter, but local forces may have them, as well as security forces, and the same goes for the A-Wing. In addition to that, they have a light freighter, and that blends into everything. So, this fleet may start out in an extremely advantageous position against whatever forces I have arrayed against it. So, if I'm not going to take a Star Destroyer into this battle, what do I intend to do in order to deal with this variety of threats? And to that end, I built out an extensive fleet with several redundancies, and also kind of slightly lied about the Star Destroyer business because my very first ship is a Victory 2 class Star Destroyer. This guy is priced at a mere 50 million credits, or one-third that of the Imperial ISD. Now, this does come with some drawbacks. For example, it only has 2 squadrons, and we're gonna have to address those squadrons and the giant elephant in the room right now. See, this is taking place at the Battle of Yavin, and we are all very accustomed to seeing TIE interceptors flying around. But unfortunately, at the Battle of Yavin, TIE interceptors are not a common craft. They are reserved for important fleets, and even then, only 1 or 2 squadrons. I'm not gonna get any of them. And that doesn't mean I wouldn't love to have interceptors. The TIE Fighter costs 60,000 credits, the TIE Interceptor 75,000. The TIE Fighter has 2 cannons and is slightly faster than an X-Wing. The TIE Interceptor is much faster and, depending upon your source, has 4 cannons and a concussion missile or 6 cannons. It is a flat upgrade. It's significantly more maneuverable and can actually take on A-Wings. But I don't have access to that. I'm probably either a captain or a commodore at this level, and that means I'm not going to be able to swing any modifications to my fleet, and certainly not a new fighter that's rolling off the line capable of dogfighting properly with these rebel craft. I'm going to be stuck with standard loadouts, and that means TIE fighters, and it hurts me so bad. The TIE fighter is made of just tissue paper. The interceptor may be made of wet tissue paper, but at least it can turn. And it's not like I'm going to be getting high quality pilots capable of properly utilizing the TIE fighter to its maximum capability. I'm getting Jimmy Imperial fresh out of the academy who's at best an average score. If I were to ever get a Soontir Fel or even someone half as good as that man, they'd be out of my fleet in a heartbeat. Someone would take them and promote them away from me. So that means I have to understand what I'm working with, and I have to expect that those X-Wings and A-Wings are going to be able to take my fighters at least 2 or 3 to 1 before we're starting to win. Assuming I'm going to use TIE fighters as a solution. So keep that in mind when you see what I come up with. So to get back to my victory, it means that my 2 squadrons are 2 squadrons of TIE fighters. Now, I'm going to give you the aggregate cost of all of my fighters at the end, so I'm not going to put up how much they cost just yet. But you did see from the previous slide how much this particular pair of squadrons would have cost. It's about, like I said, 1.44 million. Now, my next choice is going to be a bit of an older craft, but it comes with the Imperial refit, and that's the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser. It's a good all-around craft, has good shields, isn't terribly easy to destroy, and with that refit, comes with an extra squadron of TIE fighters. And I'm taking 2 of these guys. This allows me some operational flexibility at a mere cost of 7.2 million credits. Or in other words, it gives me some redundancy in any kind of a capital ship fight, while also providing some starfighter defense. It's a good all-around craft. Now, my next choice I have in 2 variants. The first one is going to be an ion cannon variant, and then the second one will be a anti-starfighter variant. And this craft is the Carrack Light Cruiser. And again, it comes with an Imperial refit that adds ties. And I'm going with the Legend version where it's 4 ties and not 5. Now, I'm taking a total of 7 Carracks, but 4 will be ion cannon variants and 3 will be anti-starfighter variants. This allows me to have these ships go out. They can handle any light cruiser as well as being able to help defend against fighters. And I can start taking rebels hostage. Well, prisoner. Not that I'm sticking them on my ship. The rebels have a tendency to blow it up when you do that. I don't want that to happen. Now, these carracks will give me an extra 28 TIE fighters, and it comes at a carrack cost of 4.3 million credits. So, I'm liking it. They're great for smaller craft. Any lighter frigates, I can send, 3 or 4 of them at it, and I've got a formation for them in mind later. Now, at this point, none of my opposition will be able to perform any proper ship-to-ship combat. Even if an MC-80 were to show up, I would be able to take that in a straight fight. So right now, I need to worry about enemy fighters. And while I am somewhat close to being able to handle the fighters on a good day, I'm not anywhere near comfortable. So my next choice is going to be revolving around dealing with enemy fighters. And I'm doing it on the cheap. So we're using an Imperial refit of a civilian craft. Coming in at 200,000 credits apiece, we have the Gazanti class cruiser. It has mild anti-starfighter weapons, but very importantly, it can carry 4 ties in its hangars underneath. Well, hangar, more like pylons that are attached. And I'm taking 18 of these boys. As you can imagine, that significantly increases the number of ties I can bring into a fight. And also, very importantly, allows me to separate out and move 4 ties at a time to a location I may need. Again, that's going to be important for my formations later. Now, I'm not actually done with how many Gazantes I'm going to do, because at this point, there is one final minor gap in my capabilities, and that's a way to handle ships that are retreating. See, right now, I've got capital ships and TIE fighters, and that's good in a straight-up fight, but the rebels are going to run, and I need a way to deal with their engines and keep them in system. So I'm going to take an additional 6 Gazanti cruisers and equip them with TIE bombers, giving me 2 squadrons of TIE bombers. Now this brings the Gazanti cost up to 4.8 million credits, which, given how many TIEs and TIE bombers they bring to the fight, that's really not that bad. In addition to that, again, the Gazantis have some level of fighter defense. It's not great, but numbers add up. This is really going to strengthen my anti-fighter defense and basically be able to take out any of those pesky X-Wings or Y-Wings going on bombing runs. Because Force knows the Empire is horrible at stopping those. And again, I don't want to get blown up. Now, this brings my total TIE fighter count to 138 TIEs and 24 TIE bombers. That Rebel assault force no longer stands a chance. If I can get even half of my fleet in one location, I'm taking out that entire assault force with minimum casualties, primarily to TIE fighters, but again, well, they're cheap and replaceable, and I'm kind of stuck with them, so what am I going to do? And the cost for the TIE fighters is going to be 8.28 million credits, and the bombers are 3.6 million credits. Those bombers are a lot more expensive than the fighters. Now this brings my total cost for my fleet to 111,180,000 credits. Now, anybody with a basic understanding of math might note that that's significantly less than the 154 million for the Star Destroyer. And that's intentional. Some of this is due to the fact that one Star Destroyer is going to have a lot lower logistical tail than my entire fleet, so I'm reserving about 20 million credits to make up for any differences in logistical capabilities that I need to improve in order to fulfill my fleet. Because again, I'm trying to replace a Star Destroyer via budget. And that means I can't really exceed my budget, and I don't know the numbers for the logistics for the Imperial Navy. So I'm overshooting that number just to be safe. But again, I'm still not hitting my numbers. I should have another roughly 20 million to work with. And for that, I say I'm going to reserve that for any local purchases I may need. So if there's an operation I need to perform that's going to need something unusual, just a particular thing that I need for that AO wherever I'm deployed, I'm still going to have the ability to buy it. So, for example, if I were in the Outer Rim, I would probably want more smaller craft to cover a wider area, whereas if I was operating towards the core, I may order a pair of Nebulon B frigates, since it's more concentrated and I'm more likely to deal with a larger opponent because no one's going to go in there with like 2 ships. But nonetheless, if that's still out of my capability, if I haven't spent my budget, I don't get it, then this fleet is still capable of doing every task I need it to do. So, how is that going to look? Well, I have a few various deployments, and these are my standard procedures for being out and about when I'm dealing with a harassment force or just generally securing a system. So, first is going to be my ship. The Victory 2, with its 24 ties, is going to have 2 Gazanti cruisers with it at all times. This gives it some extra fighter defense, and anything short of those 24 X-Wings isn't really going to be able to ambush me and do a whole lot. In addition to that, I should primarily be staying around Imperial sectors or fleet defense areas, places with additional friendly defenses that would help deter that kind of raid. If I'm going out and about, I'm going to want extra craft with me. Now, for my out and about heavy hitters, it's going to be the 2 Dreadnoughts. They're each going to go on a solo deployment with their own pair of Gazantis. This will help me lock down space lanes and trade areas, places where a lot of freighters are going to come through. 1 Dreadnought's going to keep pretty much everyone in line, while allowing me to do everything I need to do to make sure that there aren't any contraband materials in the area. As for the next deployment, it's going to be those Carracks with 2 Gazantis each. This lets them go on more deep space patrols or more abandoned locations without becoming too vulnerable to an ambush. In addition, they can drop probe droids and move on from the area. And should they come across a lone rebel or 2, they'll be able to take them. The Carrack moves pretty quickly. Now, should I start losing track of a Carrack, or if I notice there is a more coordinated effort by the local rebel cell, we're going to switch over to the next deployment, which is what I call the Wolf Pack. And this is going to be 3 Carracks and 3 Gazantis. There's going to be 2 ion cannon Carracks and 1 starfighter defense Carrack. This is going to make sure that any engagement they come across, they have 2 full squadrons of ties, as well as plenty of built-in starfighter defenses, as well as the ability to stun and capture as many rebels as they can. Intelligence is always good. But this doesn't really address what am I doing with my extra Gazantis that are lying around, and specifically the TIE bombers. Well, that's primarily because the TIE bombers, while they'll typically be standing around with my Victory, they may get deployed as reinforcements. Again, their job is to stop enemies from fleeing. So if I think there's rebels in an area, I want them close enough to jump in, but not right in the area since I don't have that many of them. Basically, their job is to jump in, detach from their Gazanti, go on a bombing run or torpedo run against the enemy engines, and then reattach to that Gazanti and get the heck out of Dodge. The TIE Bomber is basically a sitting duck, and while it's not made of tissue paper, it is made of cardboard. So I don't want it to be in the enemy's sights any longer than I have to have it. As for the extra fighter Gazantis and potentially the 1 extra Carrack, anything that isn't deployed will stick with me. And again, if I think there's a particular area that needs reinforcements, I can stick those Gazantis in a more central location where they're easier to call for backup and can hyperspace in within a few minutes as opposed to the 20 or 30 it may take me, or even hours that I might have to, depending on how far they are. And finally, we're going to address the elephant in the room here. The rebels do have access to heavier carriers. They have access to larger craft. But frankly, I don't know this. Again, I am a Commodore. I am a fairly low-ranking Imperial at this point. High enough to have my own fleet, but not that high. I don't get sector information. So I really only know the basics of what Imperial intelligence knows. And, well, the rebels are actually pretty good at hiding. But even then, my fleet has enough concentrated material to take down an NC-8. They do. Now, I have to be in one spot to do it, but I can do it. So, anyways, I think that addresses everything that I was looking for. So, if you have any opinions, any ships you think I missed, let me know. Or if you think that my deployments are wildly off target and I'm going to get shredded by these rebels, let's have a debate about it. I'm going to disagree, but let's have a debate about it. All right. Y'all have a good night. Bye.